right, good evening. We'll call to order the August 23rd Brushy Creek Regional Utility Authority meeting. Monique, if you'd call the roll.
President Baker,
Here.
Vice President Thompson,
Present.
Secretary Duffy, Director Anderson,
Here.
Director Flores,
Here.
Director Kirkland.
All right, anybody signed up to speak this evening? All right, thank you. Leads us to item number 4. If anybody's had a chance to review the minutes, take a motion to approve those.
Second.
I have a first and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Motion passes. Number 5, staff reports. 5A, consider an update from General Manager regarding BCRUA water demand.
Good evening, everybody. Hope your summer's been going well. We have a big agenda this evening with many action items that we have long awaited. But before we move to the action items, I have a couple of staff reports for you. And the first is an update on BCRUA water demands. I'm providing this to you in the same format that I provided last summer. And as you are aware, this has been an extremely hot, dry summer and low lake levels and many unprecedented demand challenges. So if you could pull up the slides for the water demand presentation, I'd appreciate that. Great. Okay, so I know it's been a while since we've looked at these, but you'll see that I'm starting out with the total water use that BCRUA has supplied to all of the 3 cities. The red line is the total plant capacity. And so this is just for August to date, the most recent information that I have. And the blue line at the top shows how the total demand has varied over the month. And then below that, we have how much the demand has been on a daily basis for all 3 cities. And so I'm going to dive in and show you the details of each individual city. So next slide, please. So starting with Round Rock, you can see that, you know, this is a sensitive topic for those that had to live through it, but the transmission pipeline break that Round Rock experienced, you could tell that is the first about 11 or 12 days. And during that time period, even though Round Rock exceeded its capacity, it had borrowed water from Cedar Park. That's why you'll see it above Round Rock's capacity allocation. It did exceed the combined capacity of Round Rock plus Cedar Park a couple of times, but by about 1 MGD. And the water that, I just wanted to clarify that the water that we delivered for the pipeline break was used for about 33,000 customers that normally would have got their water from somewhere else. So it wasn't like water was rushing out for the broken pipeline. This was just a replacement of our water from its normal source. And then after that, you can see Round Rock dropped down to about 6 million gallons per day. Next slide, please. And then Cedar Park, you could see its capacity is that red line, and then the average daily use and the peak hour use are very similar. And then right around day 9, 10, that was when Cedar Park had the wildfire, and then had to not only deliver that demand, but then replenish all of its tanks. And next slide, please. And then Leander this is, you can see throughout the month, it's pretty typical that Leander's peak is averaging around 14, and then the average day is around 10. So that was pretty consistent. It did exceed one time that was just peak hour for a couple of hours there. So I think the plant performed pretty well, considering we had been running about 5 pumps for about a month, where we had never had ever run 5 pumps prior to that. I think the most we had ever done was about four pumps for a few hours. So this was pretty unprecedented, considering the temperatures, the high demands, and the low lake levels, which made the pumps all work harder. You know, the staffing challenges that we've had, and making sure we're protecting the 36-inch pipeline, which has been holding up well. Knock on some wood there. One thing we'll be looking for is what is the additional cost for the extra power and chemicals that we used. I think we have enough budget to be able to absorb quite a bit there, so I'll just keep you posted about that. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you for that. Any questions? No? All right, well, thank you for that. It's you know, you and I were on the phone several times in the last couple of weeks, just balancing each other's stress level a little bit on the water supply this hot summer. But
Yes.
Thank you for everything you're doing on that.
I will add that at one point, our water plant that's rated at 32.5 million gallons per day did actually operate at about 34 MGD for a few hours, which, you know, our storage is there to take care of that. But we will have lots of information and data to help calibrate what our system can do as we go in the future. But it did hold up well, and I thought, so thanks for that.
Thank you.
I did want to add on to that, ask Aaron Archer from Walker Partners to give us an update on the schedule for the delivery points project. So. Oh, sorry, wrong guy. Sorry, Jason Bible,
Jason,
our
good evening.
senior project manager.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. I'm Jason Bible with Walker Partners. We have been looking at some interim improvements at the at Leander's Ronald Reagan delivery point. That is a delivery point that supplies most of BCRUA's water to Leander. That delivery point currently does not have any backflow prevention. We have some future improvements that would add backflow prevention and a little better flow control that would get them all the way through phase 3, the ultimate capacity of the plant. The interim improvements that we are working on currently would help get through to max day of phase 1D, which is the next phase that's currently in construction. We believe that project we're trying to get designed now and into construction before the summer of next year. That doesn't have any mechanical improvements really. It's really an electronic controller that's added to the existing valve, some electrical controls and that would be added into the existing control panel. And we're trying to minimize any throwaways that would be associated with the interim improvements and then the future improvements that would be added at a later date. So interim improvements for the Ronald Reagan before summer of 2024, and then the next phase of that would come in, would be online before the summer of 2025. The other delivery points all need some electrical and control improvements at those to kind of standardize the operation of each delivery point within the system. And those would be operation before the summer of 2025. The Treviso delivery point that comes out of the water treatment plant needs some mechanical improvements to improve the flow control from to the Treviso neighborhood in Leander. That one would be installed prior to the summer of 2025.
So thank you, Jason. We have been working towards getting our control valves in place per the 6th Amendment, and there has been a lot of equipment that we have determined that was not going to be available by next summer. So Jason's been working with his team and developing a strategy to allow us to get at least the major delivery points with control valves on them by summer.
Okay. Any other questions of Jason or Karen on this one? All right. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Jason. All right, item 5B, consider staff reports from the general manager regarding the Phase 2A water treatment plant basis of design.
Okay, great. So this is another item that I'm really pleased to be able to be discussing with you, and that is moving forward with the next water treatment plant expansion at the plant. That is called Phase 2A, and I'm going to ask our engineer, Aaron Archer, to walk through that, and then we'll answer any questions that you have.
Good evening.
Good evening. I realize that we've just been talking about the Phase 1D expansion and just recently awarded that contract to expand the water plant. And so it may seem odd that I'm up here talking about the next plant expansion, but I think as we go through some of the following exhibits in this slide deck, you'll understand why we're starting to plan for that today. I want to start by looking at a plot that's familiar. I think we've shown this a number of times previously to the board. It shows the project phasing for the water treatment plant, and the gold line is just the cumulative water demand requirements from all three cities collectively, which of course, as you move out into the future, is growing very rapidly. And these are demand projections that we tend to update on around an annual basis because of the rapid growth and how these become stale relatively quickly. And so these are some demand projections that I showed you probably around a year ago, and they're due for an update, but they'll suffice for today. What I want you to notice is right now the plant is at the Phase 1C capacity. So we have a 32.5 MGD treatment capacity at the plant. And if you look out at the intersection of the yellow line and the first bold line from the left, we're going to need to add capacity to the plant before we get to summer of 2025, which is why we've already initiated the Phase 1D water treatment plant expansion, which is underway, and will be online prior to reaching summer of 2025. The Phase 1D expansion will provide a treatment capacity of just under 42 MGD, but I'm showing 39 MGD on this plot because Phase 1D had been accelerated, originally scheduled to come online with Phase 2 in 2027, and we're bringing it online early right now, but we're limited by raw water capacity coming from the floating intake to about 39 MGD. So even though we have a little bit more capacity than that at the plant, that's all the raw water that we can push up to the plant. When you look out now then at 2027, summer of 2027, we are projected to exceed the capacity of Phase 1D pumping from the floating intake. And that is the time that we anticipate Phase 2 would come online, so we would get some additional raw water supply at that time. But we're starting to plan at this point on getting Phase 2 started and online for a 2027 startup. And Phase 2A is a relatively significant expansion to the plant. It would increase capacity up to 65 MGD. So another graphic that I've shown you before, but to explain the scope of Phase 2A, what we're looking at is the blue structures will all be in place by the time we start talking about Phase 2A, and that includes the entire main treatment structure in the middle of the plant. So Phase 2A takes us away from that main treatment structure and includes 2 new treatment trains shown in light green just below the blue treatment structure that represents Phase 1, and would also include at least the original programming for the facility, some additional improvements to solids handling, chemical treatment, disinfection, an administrative building, and then it originally included the 6 million gallon clear well, which is going to be added back into Phase 2A due to cost reasons. And then beyond Phase 2A, you can see additional expansions for 2B and Phase 3, which is the final build-out of the plant, which brings it up to 105.8 MGD. Looking at water capacity allocations, Phase 2A is different than any of the prior Phase 1 expansions that we've done because it only includes participation from two cities, Leander and Round Rock. Leander is a 52.4% capacity owner of the 2A expansion, which is roughly 12.1 MGD of the 23.1 MGD additional capacity that we gain through 2A. And then the difference is Round Rock at 47.6% or 11 MGD. And Cedar Park would not be participating in Phase 2A. If you look to the right in black, then you can see the cumulative treatment capacity for each of the cities after 2A comes online, keeping in mind that the treatment capacity for the cities is a little bit different than the raw water capacity coming from Phase 2, just because Phase 2 out on Lake Travis does also deliver to individual water treatment plants. Looking at the Phase 2A schedule, what I'm proposing is that we'll have a period that I'm calling a preliminary basis of design that would last for a few months to start the project, moving into final design and permitting, which I'm estimating at about 14 months. That always can vary a little bit depending on the responsiveness of regulatory agencies and also how we fund the project. A bid and award phase or procurement of about 4 months and a substantial completion construction duration of approximately 22 months, bringing it online right before the summer of 2027. Now, looking at the preliminary basis of design as a first step, I want to give you a sense of what scope would be involved with that because we're beginning to start to plan for that effort. First, we do need to go ahead and update the demand projections for the cities. And we also need to synchronize what we're going to need on the raw water pumping side. We didn't originally assume 2A would be coming online in 2027 when Phase 2, the raw water system, was designed. So we may need to increase some more raw water pumping from Lake Travis to accommodate the increased demand up at the plant. We also want to spend some time working with the operators out at the plant. Anecdotally, what we're being told right now is that water quality in Lake Travis has changed, which we anticipated once zebra mussels infested the lake that it would change. And if you're familiar with the lake and you've gone out to the lake lately, you can tell that besides the lake being really low, it looks different than I've ever seen it. I mean, it's completely filled with different types of algae and aquatic growth. The visibility is really quite good in the lake. And so we do know that water quality is a little bit different than it has been before. And what we're being told too is that does present some treatment challenges for a conventional treatment plant, treating water from Lake Travis. Occasionally it can be challenging to remove total organic carbon from the plant. And so we want to work with the operators, pause for a minute, look at raw water quality, look at our treated water quality, and spend some time looking at our treatment process. And I think that there's a few additional treatment processes that we'll want to look at and consider whether we want to implement that in the plant before we just assume we're going to launch in and continue building more of the same at that facility. And so an evaluation of treatment technologies, some costing exercises to understand present worth of different options through build out of the plant. And then that will give us a final design scope, so to speak, so that we can hit the ground running and get into final design, and if we need to, incorporate some revisions to how we treat water at the plant. And so that is a presentation of some work that is coming up with Phase 2A that hopefully you guys will be hearing more about.
I have a question for you. Are you aware of any other treatment facilities having this issue with the zebra mussels?
Zebra mussels are really a problem for everybody on the lake.
Okay.
Everybody's had to at least provide some additional treatment to keep them out of their systems. I think what makes it particularly challenging for BCRUA is a conventional treatment process that we have out there. A lot of the other plants on the lake use a different treatment process, high rate clarification, which I think is a little bit easier to treat Lake Travis water, but also not as appropriate for a plant as large as BCRUA.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
You briefly touched on the Clearwell.
Mhm.
Added,
Yeah, so the 6 million gallon clear well, initially, the way that that project was set up, we went off some budgetary pricing from the original tank manufacturer. The person who built the 4 million gallon clear well with phase one, before any engineering was being done, we went back and said, if now we're gonna build a 6 million gallon clear well, will you please help us get a budgetary price? Same type of construction, exact same thing as you've done before. We just need to establish a budget price. And they gave us a budget price that was roughly about half of the budget price that we put together once we got into engineering to study that in more detail. And they confirmed that they were quite under on their initial estimate, but doubling the cost of that project is problematic at this point. So it's being deferred back to phase 2A.
So I'll add that I wanted to let you all know that we are kicking off this next important phase of the water treatment plant expansion. Make sure we can answer any questions that you have about it. The operating committee is reviewing the scope of work that we'll bring to you for action next month. So there's no action today on this. So if you have any questions in the meantime, please reach out and we will talk about this again next month.
Let me ask a question on this graph. So if I heard you correctly, where these lines are intersecting, so this is a little bit outdated, right, based on our now current projections, right?
That's correct.
And on this particular graph, is January 1st where the year marks are?
Really, the year marks represent summer peak demands.
Okay, so those are going into the summer months, okay.
Yes.
If it's possible, if we can get an updated graph at some point, just for our benefit, because I know that we're talking a lot about drinking water, so
Absolutely.
having that in our hip pocket would be handy if we can get an updated one in the next few weeks.
And also, part of your scope is going to be to update the demands from all the three cities, is that right?
To receive the updated demand projections and then load them back into our phasing plan.
Awesome. All right.
So, do we work with a biologist that's given us updates? I've been on the lake for over a decade, and I've never seen the water so clear due to the zebra mussel infestation, which allows a lot more light into the water, which then increases your vegetation, your algae, and everything else. So, as far and also know that every treatment plant, depending on what water source you have to have a very specific treatment. So what the plant was originally designed for was one type of water, and now with the infestation, it's a different type of water. Are we looking at having to move into a chlorination process, or is that something that's being considered?
We will. The chlorination process, I don't think, is going to be really impacted by water quality changes that zebra mussels might have manifested. We are going to look at, as part of this evaluation, on-site chlorine generation rather than delivery of bulk hypochlorite, but not so much triggered by zebra mussels. The zebra mussel side, to answer your question directly on the biologist, we don't have a biologist looking at this right now. I mean, most of the algae in Lake Travis is things like milfoil and others that are actually characterized as a relatively healthy body of water. The challenge primarily at this treatment plant is as the water is clear or has less turbidity, it's more difficult to settle in a conventional treatment process like we have right now. And so we remove fewer material through our sedimentation process than we would like. So we want to look at that more closely.
Director Flores.
If you're going to work on the graph that's being shown, I think it'd also be interesting to see either on this graph or a separate graph, kind of the three cities' demands or capacities on there. I think it's in a different chart, but I think it'd be nice to overlay on this as well to kind of
Absolutely.
see.
Yeah, we have that information and can show it beneath, adding up to the yellow line.
Yep. Thank you.
I did also forget to mention on the schedule, one item I'd like you guys to track is that if we decide we want to go back to Water Development Board, so for SWIFT funding, we really have two shots at that. The application process opens in January of each year, so you could go back this coming January, or you could wait till the following January. In the following January, I think you'd have a better idea of what construction costs would look like, and so that might be advisable, but we'll need to start looking at that and talking about that.
Thank you. Anything else? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
For 6A, okay. All right, that moves us to resolution. 6A, consider a resolution approving the BCRUA quarterly investment report for April 1, 2023 to June 30th, 2023. Susan, I think that's you. Good evening.
Good evening, President and board members. I'm Susan Morgan. I'm the CFO for the City of Round Rock, and it's an honor to be back in front of you. What you have in front of you is the quarterly investment report from March 31st to June 30th. That's your third fiscal quarter. It's been it's been a very uneventful quarter from an investment standpoint. You've had one maturity and one reinvestment, got some interest earnings, but for the most part, what's been happening is you've been spending money on construction, which is what the bulk of your portfolio is there to do, is to pay for all those improvements. If you look at, it's about 5 pages into that packet, your portfolio market value dropped to $14.2 million. That's really just because you're spending the money on the construction, primarily on phase 2, just like you planned. That's what that money's for. You'll notice you still, still have an unrealized gain, an unrealized loss of $590,000. You've been seeing that these past few quarters. That's really just a function, a reporting number. It's a function of a rising interest rate market as our investments mature and we reinvest at those higher rates. Over time, that will go away. That is an unrealized loss. That's just to tell you if we had to liquidate the portfolio on June 30th, that's the likely loss we would have. We don't invest that way. We invest to hold to maturity. We know what our expected cash flows are for the capital projects, so we don't expect ever having that, being faced with that. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions. This report and all of our transactions have been in compliance with the Public Funds Investment Act and your investment policy.
All right, thank you. Questions on this item? All right, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve 6A.
I'll make a motion to approve.
And second.
All right, we have a first and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, resolution passes. Thank you. 6B, consider a resolution approving a financing agreement between the Brushy Creek Regional Utility Authority, Inc. and other matters in connection therewith relating to the sale of $41,750,000 Brushy Creek Regional Utility Authority, Inc., City of Round Rock, Texas contract revenue bonds, proposed series 2023.
Thank you, Mr. President. The next two items, 6B and 6C, will be presented together, but will each require separate actions. I'm pleased to share that the Texas Water Development Board formally approved BCRUA's loan application for construction funds for the Phase 2 deep water intake, the electrical improvements for the Phase 2 raw water pump station, and Phase 1D treatment capacity expansion, and associated bid and construction phase services. And we have previously received funding for these projects, but we have estimated the need for an additional $30 million for these projects to address recent cost escalations since the time the projects were estimated. The three cities are addressing their funding for the projects I just described differently. So Leander is planning to use local funds for its portion of this cost. Cedar Park is using local funds for Phase 1D, which is their ARPA grant, and SWIFT funds for the Phase 2 costs. And then Round Rock is planning to use SWIFT funding for its portion of this $30 million, as well as SWIFT funding to replace previously planned project cash funding. So I have with us today, I'd like to introduce Richard Donahue from McCall Parkhurst and Horton. He's our bond counsel, and he's going to walk you through the financing agreement.
Good evening. Thanks for being here.
Good evening. Thank you all. For the record, I'm Richard Donahue, partner with McCall Parkhurst and Horton, bond counsel to BCRUA on these two issues that are the subject of these items. This is the Water Development Board will be going out and issuing their own debt to provide the funding source to fund your bonds. So in order to do that, it's standard procedure for them to require a financing agreement, which is a commitment from borrowers to actually issue their own bonds and to go through it. The Water Development Board doesn't want to be in a position of issuing their own debt and then not having the loans to actually be made. So there are going to be financial penalties on the back end if you don't move forward. And this is the same process and requirements that they've had in their prior agreements that you all have agreed to. So this is just making sure that you are committed to moving forward with the financing by approving this agreement. The resolution authorizes your general manager to sign these agreements, subject to each city also approving the financing agreement execution. Both cities, Cedar Park and Round Rock, are scheduled to consider those financing agreement approvals at their meetings tomorrow night. The Water Development Board wants these agreements signed back by September 7th. Even in, based on the current schedule at the back, the expectation is the Water Development Board will be pricing their bonds in the middle of September, so there'd be about 14 days up until then. So estimated right now around September 12th, where you could give the Water Development Board notice that you did not want to go forward, and if that were the case. I don't believe anyone anticipates that, but after that, the penalties start to accrue the later you go in the process. So. Happy to take any questions. Again, these are the same type of financing commitments that are made in the process that we've done in the past. Also, I guess I should mention that in discussing with Gary, who couldn't be here tonight, your financial advisor, that the preliminary interest rates expected, interest rates won't be finalized until the Water Development Board goes out and sells their bonds, and then the current schedule expects we'll know what the rates are on October 5th. But preliminarily, based on current rates, Cedar Park will be looking at a 2.9% rate, and that's a 20-year term, and Round Rock should be slightly higher because they're looking at a 25-year term at 3.4% based on preliminary rates currently. Happy to take any questions.
Any other questions?
Any questions of directors?
We will be bringing the bond resolutions to the board on these two loans in October.
That's correct.
Okay, great, thank you. Accept the motion for item 6B.
Move to approve.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, that moves us to 6C. Anything to add on 6C?
Motion to approve.
I think you have to call it up first.
Oh, you're right, I need to read it in. Thank you so much. Item 6C, consider a resolution approving a financing agreement between the Brushy Creek Regional Utility Authority and other matters in connection therewith relating to the sale of $7,605,000 Brushy Creek Regional Utility Authority, Inc., City of Cedar Park, Texas contract revenue bonds. If there's nothing further, we have a motion, we have a second. All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion passes. Okay, item 6D, consider a resolution authorizing the president to execute a construction contract with Dale Construction Company for the underwater pipeline improvement project.
Thank you, Mr. President. We are also very excited to present the contract to replace the section of the 36-inch underwater pipeline that you've heard way too much about. And so that we have now advertised and opened the proposals for that replacement pipeline. So I am going to call up our engineer for the project from Walker Partners, Jason Bible, our senior project manager, to review the proposals that we received.
All right, good evening again.
Hello again. We did receive 2 bids on the underwater pipeline project. We knew that our current contractor on the Phase 2 project was going to bid that project. They're kind of well-positioned for that work where they're currently situated for the raw water intake construction. They were the successful bidder. Our initial estimate for that, for the base bid, was $6,546,000. The base bid did come in at $6.5 million. There's an additional $210,000 worth of allowances in case the lake comes up really fast or we need additional drilling in the lake. So that construction contract is for $6,710,000.
You have the proposal tabulation and the engineer's recommendation letter in your packet. As Jason said, although Thale construction company has a lot of work going on right now with us. Their subcontractor, Global Divers, will be doing most of the work, and we've had excellent work from them. And they're very familiar with our pipeline. They've been doing the inspections, so we feel pretty confident that even though Thale already is, pretty loaded up with work, that we will get a good result from them. We also, in this item, we are replacing some raw water valves that are in other sections of pipeline, not this pipeline, but we needed to get those done, and we have included them in this package. As far as funding goes, BCRU obtained $5 million of ARPA funds from Williamson County for this project, and so the remaining costs will be split between the 3 cities. Since this contract will exceed the board's authorized amount of $500,000 for the master agreement, the contract will go to all 3 city councils, and Leander has already approved it, so thank you, Leander. So the other ones will happen tomorrow night, I believe. As far as the schedule goes, you want to go over that, Jason?
Yeah, as you recall, we pre-procured the pipe. This is special pipe. There was about an 8-month lead time on getting that pipe in, so I believe that was pre-procured in June. I think it was a May or a June approval by the BCRUA board. So that pipe is scheduled to be delivered on site the end of November, which exceeds what we required by the contract by a couple weeks. So we expect Thale and Global Diving to begin kind of the pre-inspection process here in September and get geared up for the early installation beginning December, January timeframe. As part of this project, there'll be a 30-day shutdown of the raw water transmission main and the treatment plant. And so during that 30-day timeline, they'll be making the tie-ins into the existing pipeline and all the valve improvements and replacements. And so it's a lot of work that has to get done in a 30-day time frame. But currently, it's a 210-day contract. That means that the contract would have to be complete by the end of March. We expect that they can do much better than that. I anticipate them to be complete by the end of February.
All right, any questions, comments on this item? Yes, sir.
Was just curious, was there any surprise or concern that the other vendor was $5.5 million higher than?
No, I mean, I think that it's an out-of-town contractor. They didn't have a good location on the lake from which to stage. I think they just threw a bid out to see if they could win,
All right. Well, I mean, I guess it lined up with what the expectation was for the project, so I guess that means that Thale was pretty close to.
Right, and as Karen mentioned, the Global Diving has been, pretty instrumental with the raw water line repairs that have been undertaken over the last couple months or year. And so they're very familiar with this area, these tie-in locations. They've actually worked with some of the pieces of pipe that we're going to be using on this project. Their staging area is, a 2-minute boat ride from where they're currently staged, or where they need to be doing the work. So it all really worked well in their favor.
Okay. All right, thank you.
And it looks like timing-wise, since we need to be, doing this during the off-peak time, it looks like pre-ordering the pipe was a good foresight on y'all's part. So
It was, yep.
Good timing. That way it didn't put us into next summer.
Worked out well.
Good job on that.
I will also add, somewhat related to this item, that regarding the lawsuit over this pipeline, we now have a trial date, which is set for August 5th of 2024. And once we are a little further along in the discovery, we'll have our attorney come in and brief you on that topic.
Okay, thank you for that. Motion to approve 6D?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, motion passes. Thank you very much. All right, item 6E, consider a resolution authorizing the president to execute a dispute resolution board agreement between the Brushy Creek Regional Utility Authority, THAL, SAC Joint Venture, and dispute resolution board members.
Thank you, Mr. President. The contract between BCRUA and THAL SAK Joint Venture for the construction of the Phase 2 raw water delivery system includes an alternative dispute resolution process that, as part of that, a dispute resolution board is required to be established. We're not bringing this to you now because there are any disputes that would be going to the dispute resolution board, but we're at a point now, a year into the project, that we know disputes could arise, and we want to make sure that we have this process in place. And really, the purpose of the process is to avoid disputes by fostering and conducting proactive discussion on project issues and engaging a dispute resolution board to assist with resolutions of the issues. So the DRB, as we call it, will consist of 3 impartial members that have substantial experience in this type of excavation, demolition, design or construction of tunnels and shafts required for the project. The way we would work is BCRUA would and has selected a DRB member that we would consider expert in these issues. And then the contractor also has selected a member. And then the 2 of those that were selected, they select a 3rd member. So we already have the candidates for the dispute resolution board. Now, if any disputes do arise, either BCRUA or the contractor can initiate a dispute referral to the DRB. And then that would be, the DRB process would kick in and they would establish a hearing process. One of the important parts of this dispute resolution process is that these DRB members, they will stay informed about the project throughout the entire project. So if something comes up, they already have the knowledge and the to be able to jump right in and do their analysis and, you know, understand the context of the dispute, if there is one, in the resolution of that. So they will be involved, and will, as soon as we get this agreement executed, then we'll get them to start coming in and being, they won't really be part of the project, but they'll be observers. They'll do their own research. And this is a pretty common way to manage disputes related to underground work, because it's really hard, you know, to observe it. So, and you really need to be an expert to know enough to be able to understand disputes and be able to come up with a recommendation for resolution. It's important also to know that the DRB will make recommendations, but they're non-binding. Each partner could walk away and seek other dispute resolution mechanisms that probably wouldn't be as easy as working with the DRB and taking their recommendations. So this item, it authorizes BCRUA to enter into a dispute resolution board agreement with a contractor and the DRB members. I will tell you, all of the 3 cities' attorneys and our litigating attorney have been very heavily involved, so this contract is well reviewed, and we could have our attorney comment on that if he would like. But so we'd be happy to answer any questions. Aaron Archer and his staff have done a good job working through this, and Aaron's available to answer any questions.
Question?
Yeah, I had a question for you. I understand this is a part of the process with THAL, but have we used this process with any other contracts for BCRUA?
Go ahead, Aaron.
That's a good question. No, we have not used it before. It really originated in the tunneling industry, and it's become standard on large tunneling projects, but this is our first large tunneling project.
Thank you.
In my previous employment, I was working on a $300 million reservoir that had some underground work. And we didn't have this particular mechanism, but we had a technical review board that was there throughout the whole process and did advise both the contractor and the engineer. I'll also mention that what will you talk about the funding, so you'll be more
Yeah,
specific.
basically the way that it gets paid is 50/50. The contractor will pay for DRB involvement initially, and then the owner reimburses their 50%. Like Karen said, the way I look at it is it's kind of like mediation. It's advisory. It's not legally binding, but what is better than mediation, at least in this case, is that it's established now at the beginning of the project, so they're involved with the project. They can render decisions more quickly, and that saves cost ultimately. And rather than mediation where you have someone that's not familiar with the subject matter, these individuals are subject matter experts.
Yes, sir. Councilmember Flores.
So just to make sure I'm kind of understanding, so in the event of a dispute and it's discussed and by this three-member team, and is there ever a time when that three-member team doesn't come to a consensus, and does it go beyond that, or is it always going to be solved at that level?
They will always render an opinion, and they may have a member that is perhaps dissenting from the other two or the majority opinion, but they'll always render an opinion.
And is that opinion rendered to this board? Is that opinion rendered to who?
It'd be rendered to the contractor, the LSAK joint venture, and BCRUA.
Okay, thank you.
And if they choose to, then they could enter into a written settlement to formalize the recommendations of the DRB if they agree with it, but there's no obligation to.
Thank you.
I had a question on the payment. So I think what I heard you say is that they'll be briefed along the way as part of the process. So will they be billing for their time on those briefings as well, even though we may not activate the process?
That's correct.
Okay. And then who chooses the rate at which they're billed? I know they're professionals. Is that is that in here? I didn't see it.
I believe it's in the agreement.
Is it in there? Okay. Okay. All right. All right. Any other questions? All right. Accept a motion to approve 6E.
I move to approve.
Second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. 6E passes. Thank you very much. All right. Item 6F. Consider a resolution authorizing the general manager to pay the invoice from Pedernales Electric Cooperative for constructing dual power feed to the BCRUA barge.
Thank you, Mr. President. And for our final item, we are requesting approval to expend funds to provide a second electrical power feed to the BCRUA raw water barge. A little background, one of the primary electrical concerns for BCRUA's raw water barge is a lack of backup power. And that is primarily because during original construction of the raw water barge in 2012, dual power feed from Pedernales Electric Co-op was not available. So service interruptions to our one primary electrical circuit have been an issue for us, and primarily because they result in shutdown of the pumps, and then because we have a very long raw water line that goes up to the intake, then the raw water that's in the pipeline also is lost. So we are, we also, in addition to just PEC having service interruptions, there are also minor interruptions that occur, frequency fluctuations from PEC that cause our motors to trip without notice. And the electrical equipment for that is located about 10 miles from where our plant is, so requires our personnel to go down and manually reset the trip device. And again, you're losing all that raw water. So our Walker Partners engineering team recently identified that the temporary power project that BCRUA recently completed for the Phase 2 raw water pump station had excess capacity, more than what the contractor's using less of the electrical service that we had originally planned for. And that excess service was available for BCRUA to use for its raw water intake barge. So our engineers approached PEC, and then PEC then investigated and confirmed the excess capacity and said that they would be happy to, for a fee, extend the service required for us to have the advantage and an automatic transfer switch. So what you have in your packet is a proposal from PEC to construct those system improvements at a cost of $180,690. The addition of this second utility circuit will reduce downtime associated with power failures and significantly benefit the raw water barge operation. And our operating committee could not support this more than they have. So we would recommend this. We would try to fund this from excess operating funds, and that somewhat depends on how much our PEC bill is for this last month and chemicals. But if we are unable to fund it from operating funds, all three cities have said they'll use their local city funds. So we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions?
Yeah, so this is a true dual feed. It's going to be a feed from a separate substation than we currently have.
This is where Aaron comes in, please.
That's correct. It's coming from a separate substation. This is going to come from the nameless substation, so it'll be a totally separate feed. It terminates right now at the pump station for Phase 2, and so all it requires is a few poles to come around Cedar Park's plant to make that connection.
And it includes the automatic transfer switch. That's a bargain at twice the price.
What's the timing on this?
They said it would just take a couple of weeks.
It's a pretty small project for them to complete.
Okay, good. All right, other questions? All right, well, sounds like a good deal. Looked out. All right, take a motion to accept 6F.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right, we have a first and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, 6F passes. All right, thank you all, and I appreciate you all for preparing for all that. Leads us to item 7, Director closing comments. I'll start to my right. Director Kirkland.
Good meeting. Thank you for coming tonight.
All right. Secretary Duffy.
Oh, yeah, thank you, and thank you, for being good partners when everyone is in a crisis, being able to step up, so that's great. Thanks.
Vice President Thompson.
Thank you to BCRUA, staff and team, and to all our partners for working on all these projects to get done. So we appreciate y'all.
Director Anderson.
Agreed. Thank you and good night.
All right. Director Flores.
Thanks as well to staff, Karen and your team, OC, Walker, everybody. That glaring light is not just the sun, but it's the scrutiny as well to make sure we all get this right. So I appreciate all your efforts. Thank y'all.
And I would just like to echo the same thank you for the partnership with the cities. We all have had some challenges the last few weeks, and so appreciate everybody working together. Also want to take an opportunity to thank Monique. This is your last meeting, I think, to run for us, and you've been here since the beginning, so that's a huge part of your career. So thank you for that. And we're lucky to have Devetta, I think, starting with us at our next meeting, and so we look forward to working with you. So, but thank you for your service and the great work you've done for the BCRUA. So with that, I'm there. Thank you. With that, no further comments. We're adjourned.